Every year, Americans eat more bananas than apples and oranges combined. They're cheaper than almost any other fruit. And they're always there, 12 months a year. But here's the strange part. America barely grows a single banana of its own. So how do billions of bananas still reach every American supermarket, every single day, all year round? A fruit America can't grow became the fruit America eats most. And so cheap, it's almost free. Behind America's cheapest fruit is a global machine, and it's far more fragile than you think. We follow the banana, from cloned plantations in Ecuador, across machines and ocean ships, to rooms run by AI right here on American soil. And that journey begins with a paradox. Bananas need the hot, humid heat of the tropics, something almost none of the United States has. Only a sliver of Hawaii and Florida is warm enough, but it's nowhere near what Americans eat every day. So nearly every banana in America is imported, shipped in from tropical lands thousands of miles away. Most come from Latin America, and Ecuador alone is the largest banana exporter on Earth. Almost every banana you've ever eaten is a copy of the same single plant, and that sameness is exactly why your shelves are never empty all year round. To understand why, we have to start where every banana begins, not on a tree, but inside a laboratory. A banana doesn't start from a seed, because commercial bananas barely have any. Instead, it begins in a lab, where a tiny piece of tissue from a mother plant is cloned into thousands of identical seedlings. This gives growers disease-free, perfectly uniform plants, something natural offshoots could never guarantee. But that uniformity comes at a price. If every plant is identical, whatever kills one can kill them all. We'll come back to that. But however perfect the seedling is, it's useless if the land isn't ready. And before a single seedling touches the ground, the entire field has to be rebuilt, because bananas only survive on deep, well-drained soil. In the tropics where rain pours down, standing water can rot an entire field's roots, so growers dig a web of drainage canals across the land to pull water away fast. The soil is raised into beds, and the rows are laid out in double lines, packing in more plants while leaving paths so no one compacts the roots. Only now, after 8 to 12 weeks in the nursery, do the seedlings finally move to the field and go into the beds. A single hectare can pack over 2,000 plants, dense spacing that boosts yield, but turns the whole field into one vulnerable carpet. To sustain that kind of density, the plants need industrial-scale care, and the first thing is water. On many plantations, high-pressure sprinklers rise above the field and throw out an artificial rain that blankets the entire crop. But on the most modern farms, water goes straight to each root through a drip system, far more precise and far less wasteful than a blanket of rain. Fertilizer is dissolved straight into the irrigation water, pumped to the roots in pre-measured doses, a system called fertigation that turns feeding the plant into an exact science. But no matter how well it's cared for, the banana has one invisible enemy: fungus, spreading leaf by leaf across the field. To stop this fungus, for decades the industry had just one weapon: aircraft. Small planes dive low over the canopy, trailing a white cloud of fungicide that blankets the whole plantation. And they have to spray a lot. In Costa Rica, a single plantation can be sprayed up to 70 times a year, nearly double a decade ago, because the fungus keeps growing resistant. Every spray is another massive cost. But aerial spraying has a problem. The chemicals drift onto rivers and nearby communities. So more and more plantations are switching to something far more precise: drones. The drones fly just above the canopy, spraying a fine mist straight onto the leaves, more precise than planes, and safer for workers. Each one carries 30 liters of spray, doing in an hour what a dozen workers would need a full day for. But the most impressive tech isn't for spraying, it's for seeing. The same drones climb 70 meters up and capture over 1,000 photos per plantation. AI software stitches them into one giant map, then spots infected plants before the human eye ever could, including the most dangerous fungus of all, TR4. But even with machines handling the spraying and the scouting, there's still plenty only human hands can do. For months, workers return to each plant, cutting old leaves and trimming young shoots, keeping just one to carry the next season. This is work machines still can't replace, because choosing which shoot to keep, which leaf to cut, still needs a human eye and hand. Down at ground level, there's another battle. Weeds stealing water and nutrients from the bananas. Thanks to the double-row layout, a tractor-pulled mower can slip between the beds, clearing weeds without ever touching the plants. Once the plant is mature enough, the bunch finally emerges, and the moment it does, it's immediately wrapped in a blue plastic bag. And that blue color is no accident. The blue filters sunlight in a special way. It blocks the UV rays that scorch the fruit, but traps the warmth inside, so the bunch grows faster and heavier. A bunch can weigh up to 50 kilograms, so each plant has to be propped with cords or poles to keep it from collapsing before harvest. About 9 months after planting, after all that water, spray, labor, and waiting, the bunch is finally ready. But it'll be cut while still completely green, and that's a deliberate choice. The answer is distance. A banana ripened on the plant would turn soft and rot long before it ever reached America. So this entire industry is built around one rule: pick it green, then race the clock. Harvesting takes exactly 2 people. One cuts the stalk, the other catches the bunch on their shoulder, because one small bruise now can drop the whole bunch from export grade. And these bunches are not small. One can weigh up to 50 kilograms, almost as much as a grown adult, dangling on a single worker's shoulder. But no one carries the bunches far. Instead, each one is hooked onto a steel cable strung across the plantation, turning the whole farm into a network of skyways. Dozens of bunches are linked into one long train, then pulled smoothly toward the packing house. On some plantations, the cables cover nearly the entire field. Each bunch is kept apart by a spacer bar, so they don't swing into each other and bruise. A gentleness that follows the banana all the way from field to shelf. Inside, while the bunch still hangs on the cable, workers start dehanding, slicing off each cluster and dropping it straight into a large tank of water. But a whole hand is still too big to sell. Another worker takes a curved knife and quickly carves each hand into small clusters of just a few fingers, exactly the size you see on the supermarket shelf. Every cut leaks a stream of latex, and if it stains the peel, it ruins the look. So the clusters soak in the tank until the flow fully stops, usually about 15 minutes. From here, everything speeds up. Clusters are sorted by size, washed again in a sterilizing solution, then stamped with the brand logos the whole world recognizes. Before boxing, the cut surface on each cluster's crown is sprayed with a protective solution. That cut is an open door for rot to enter, and if it isn't sealed here, an entire box could spoil halfway across the ocean. Each cluster is weighed precisely before boxing, and an inspector eyes every batch, pulling out anything that doesn't meet the grade. Finally, the green clusters are packed into cartons weighing exactly 18 kilograms, stamped, labeled, and ready for the longest leg of the banana's life. But packing isn't the end. From this moment, the banana begins a race against time, because it's still green, still alive, and has to cross thousands of miles of ocean before it ripens. The green boxes are loaded into refrigerated containers, chilled to exactly 13 degrees Celsius, cold enough to put the fruit to sleep, but never colder, because just a touch below that ruins it for good. Each container is a tiny life support machine. A microprocessor tracks the temperature every second, even when the container is unplugged during port loading. Then, the giant ship leaves Guayaquil, crosses the Panama Canal, and heads up the US East Coast, a journey of over 3,000 miles, lasting anywhere from 1 week to a full 2 weeks at sea. But cold alone isn't enough. On modern ships, nitrogen gas is pumped into the hold, pushing oxygen out, slowing the fruit's breathing until it nearly stops ripening. The entire hold becomes an artificial atmosphere, controlled down to the last detail. And these ships are staggeringly huge. The largest can carry 1,000 containers of bananas at once, the biggest floating cold storage ever to sail the ocean. On its way north, the ship must pass through one of the busiest choke points on Earth, the Panama Canal. Massive locks lift the entire vessel 16 meters up, then lower it on the other side, an engineering marvel every banana has to cross. Through all of it, the banana stays green, still breathing, quietly giving off the very gas that ripens it. The whole ship is a balancing act to keep millions of fruit asleep at just the right moment. Most bananas entering America land at a single port in Delaware, the Port of Wilmington, where giants like Dole and Chiquita run their distribution hubs for the entire East Coast. The moment the ship docks, another race begins. Giant gantry cranes lift each container, weighing dozens of tons, down to the port, steady and relentless, to get the bananas inland before they wake up. From the port, containers are unloaded, moved onto refrigerated trucks, and rushed to distribution centers across America, still without a single fruit allowed to ripen. After all those days at sea and on the road, the banana arrives at the distribution center as green as the day it left the farm. Now comes the strangest step of all. It has to be deliberately woken up. The boxes are pushed into sealed chambers called ripening rooms. The temperature is raised, then a natural gas is pumped in, ethylene, the very gas the banana gives off itself, now used to trigger ripening all at once. The gas is held for about a day, then drawn out. After that, in just 3 to 5 days, the entire room turns from green to yellow, the exact shade Americans expect on the shelf. For decades, getting the ripeness just right was an art, relying on the experience of workers who walked in to inspect every day. But now, an AI system has taken over that job. Wireless sensors sit right inside the room, constantly measuring the gas the fruit gives off, then adjusting temperature and airflow on their own. That's how a single room holding thousands of boxes can ripen to the exact same shade of yellow, right on the day they need to ship, with barely a human hand involved. And only then, after 9 months of growing, 2 weeks at sea, and 5 days of being machine-woken, does the banana reach the American shelf, cheaper than almost any other fruit. But that low price is hiding a troubling truth. That troubling truth starts with the very number that makes the banana so appealing: its price. Americans spend around $2.5 billion a year on imported bananas, the largest import market on Earth. On the other side, entire economies are built on the banana. Ecuador alone exports $3 billion of bananas a year. Add Costa Rica and Colombia, and these 3 countries make up nearly half of all banana export value worldwide. And despite all that labor, machinery, and ocean, the banana still sells for only about 65 cents a pound, cheaper than almost any fruit grown right on American soil. But that unbelievably low price only works because of one thing: total uniformity. Remember, almost every banana on Earth is the same variety, called Cavendish, and they're all clones of one another. That sameness is what lets every step be automated. The same size to fit the same box, the same ripening speed to fill one room, the same traits to load one ship. This entire global machine works because the bananas are identical. But here's the terrifying paradox: the very thing that makes the industry run is the very thing that could wipe it out. Because if every plant is identical, a disease that kills one can kill them all. And this isn't the first time. Until the 1950s, Americans ate a completely different banana called Gros Michel. Bigger, sweeter, said to taste better than today's Cavendish. Then a fungus appeared. That soil fungus, called Panama disease, spread from farm to farm with no cure. By the 1960s, it had wiped Gros Michel from global trade, and the industry was forced to find a disease-resistant replacement: the Cavendish. But history is repeating itself. A new strain of that same fungus, called TR4, has emerged, and this time, the Cavendish has no resistance. It's already spread to 24 countries, and there's still no cure. Most alarming, TR4 has now reached Latin America, the source of nearly all of America's bananas. Right now, Ecuador is being forced to replant up to 15% of its fields, and prices have already started to climb. This time, the industry is determined not to be caught off guard. Labs around the world are racing to create gene-edited Cavendish that can resist TR4, while drones and AI scan day and night to catch the disease before it's too late. So next time you grab a bunch of bananas for under $1, remember, it's not just America's cheapest fruit. It's the product of 9 months of care, thousands of miles of ocean, and a biological gamble the whole world is holding its breath over. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe for more stories behind the world's most important crops.